got a next available part number here, and I'm going to paste the manufacturer part number in, and just tab back and forth, grab things like description. It's a 2-pin connector, so I know my symbol name is just going to be Con2, manufacturer, Phoenix contact. I like to copy and paste everything so that I don't make mistakes any more than necessary. Price, I'll just grab the onesie twosie price. Key part number. And the footprint ref, I usually use the manufacturer part number for the footprint ref. So if you're doing an integrated library, you'll do something similar to this. You'll just put all these properties in the component in the schematic library. Okay, that's enough to get us started. And so I don't have to create my symbol. It's just a 2-pin connector. I've already got a symbol for that. It's a real simple symbol. But for my footprint, I'll put the name right there. So I know I need a footprint with that name. And I'm assuming I don't have that in my library. So when you're working with a team, it's nice for everybody to have their own central PCB library. That way you're the only one that's editing it. We like to share all our stuff on Dropbox. That way if you're the only one editing it, you don't get conflicts. Well, let's see if we got that one in here. Nope. That's good. So we'll say new component, and that's our name. I don't bother entering the description in there. Now it's right next to some other ones that are pretty close. So I'll probably, if I was just making this quickly, I would just use these pads and reduce to the number of pads that I wanted. But I'll just go through the whole thing since I'm trying to show you how to do it from the beginning. So here we gotta look at the data sheet. If they provide a connector model somewhere with Altium, that's great. If not, you can always just make it from the data sheet. So usually Phoenix has like a drill pattern down at the end of their data sheet. Finding the right information with stuff is about half of it. There you go. Okay, drilling diagram. So this is probably the edge of the board. Looks like everything's in millimeters. I tend to work in inches. So 5.08 millimeter spacing. I'll just put my library in millimeters just to match this so it's not confusing. I know I only have 2 connectors. And then you want to grab the diameter of the drill, and it looks like it's 1.4 millimeters. So we'll go and put a pad down first. It's kind of confusing on Altium if you're first starting, but if you hover over it, it'll tell you on the menu command if it's a pad or a via. Vias are just for printed circuit board layout. I'll start off with 1, and it said 1.4 millimeters, so we put that here in the hole size, 0.4. And then just a good heuristic or rule of thumb is to make the X and the Y size double the hole size, and that'll let you get a soldering iron on it, which for through hole, I mean, you're going to need to either use a solder pot or a soldering iron, and this lets you transfer a good amount of heat to the pen through the pad. So that looks about right. And then I'm going to put my second one down, but I want to make sure that I have it on the right spacing. So if we look back over here, it's 5.08 millimeters. So I'm just going to change the grid, and in Altium that's G, and go to grid properties, and then 5.08 millimeters, and say OK. And now I can only put it down on that grid. So now I know they're the right distance apart. So the other thing is, I want to make it just like their pin connection. So I don't know if it's 1, 2, or if the 1 should be over here and the 2 should be over there. Let's see if we can figure it out from their diagram. And they don't show a pin 1. So I'll cheat and I'll look over at some of these other ones that I've done and look at it in 3D view. Altium takes a minute to render the model. So here, this gets tricky because this is a vertical. But if we look at these features here, and then, okay, so 1 is on, it's hard to describe. Okay. So I'm guessing we've got this little notch here, this little feature, so that looks like a 1. So if we go over here and back at our other component, where did we go? Yeah, I think I got this backwards. It's not a showstopper. It can be kind of confusing sometimes because they don't always show you which one is pin 1 in the data sheet. Okay, so we'll run with that. The next thing, I mean, you really want an outline, a silk outline, but I wait to put the outline on until I have the 3D model in there, because then you can see it and just copy it. You don't have to do any fancy calculations. So sometimes DigiKey has a 3D model right here, and I'm looking at it. I don't see a link, but Phoenix is good about having the 3D model on their website. So I'll copy the part number and then go down to the manufacturer. I think it's all the way at the bottom of the page, typically. Maybe not. Okay, so I'll just click DigiKey's link. I think it's at the bottom of this page. Phoenix Contact website. Close this out. And you can usually find them just from the search. Go to product. And I think it's usually in like technical data on Phoenix's site. Maybe. Downloads. Here we go. Okay, so Altium needs step files. So there we go, step file. I use WinZip, WinRAR, I forget what it's called. Yeah, WinRAR. And I'm just going to extract it to its own folder. And if you hold down Shift and right click on a file, you'll get this copy path in the menu. If you just right click it, you don't always get that copy path. And we want to copy the path so that we can just paste it right into Altium. We don't have to go looking for the download. So I've put this icon on my toolbar, and I think it's like a component. Yeah, place 3D body, and I think it's it's gonna be hard for me to find it. It's not here. It's not managed 3D body. Yeah, it's buried. That's why I put it in on the toolbar. I'll come back to that. Anyway, this little button here, you can customize things pretty easily in Altium. But here's the place 3D body. That's what you want. Generic 3D model is going to give you the option to pull in a step model. So I'll load from file, and this is where I can just paste it because I copied the path. I just leave all this stuff to defaults. In the footprint editor, it's usually on the top side. If you're putting stuff on the bottom side, that's going to be weird. Okay. So I don't know what the shape is. Just looking at it right now, it just looks like a blob. That's okay. I'll just put it down. And then I hit the 3 on the numpad to switch to 3D view. And I've got a little $100 3D connection space navigator, which Altium's method for rotating things in 3D space is terrible. I've used SolidWorks, and you don't need a special controller, but in Altium you do, from what I found. So my rotation's off. So the Z is pointing up. That's, showing what side the top should be on. So let's see if we can figure this out. It looks like it needs to be rotated in X. So let's just do one 90-degree rotation in X and see where we're at. So at least, okay, so now it's oriented correctly. Now we want to make sure that the bottom is flush with the top of the board. And it might already be. Let's see where we're at. We'll go, if you hit 0, it'll snap you to an orthogonal view of the top. So if I can click and drag here, and my grid is really coarse, I'm going to change it to a 25 mil grid. If I hit spacebar, it rotates. So I think that's the correct orientation now. So now we're pretty close. We're off still. And it looks like the height above the board just came in correctly. If it wasn't, I've got this set body height mapped to my toolbar as well. So I click that and I left click and drag until I find like a corner that's good. So I know that corner needs to be on the board surface. So now I let go and it just says board surface. It's already there, but I'll click OK. And it would move it if it would snap it right to the board surface. So now let's get these lined up really well. Let's try from the top and see what we can get. It'll make it transparent. So I'm going to change my grid to 1 mil. And see, I can't see the pins. So I'm going to have to do this from the bottom. Sometimes works out okay to do it from the top. Okay, so for this I just zoom in really close, and you don't click on the pad because then you'll move the pad. So click off of the pad and then just get it centered. If you want to, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. Get real fine. And it doesn't have to be super perfect. And if I hit enter now, even if I'm left clicking, it'll drop it. So that's close. It looks like maybe like a 1/2 mil off somewhere here or there, but we don't care about 1/2 mils here. All right. So I think we're good there. Now I'm going to draw my silk. So I've got my mechanical layer, and I'll just copy the silk outline here. So I'll make sure that I'm on the silk layer. Make sure I've got the silk layer on. And it defaults to, when you come back out of 3D view, you've got like all these layers on. So I usually turn off all the mechanical layers except for the one that I need to show me the 3D body. Turn all these off. Turn all these off. Turn off the bottom silk. There, I've got 2 layers on really. The top overlay and the top layer. And now make sure whatever layer you've got clicked down here, that's what you're going to draw on. And this is super simple. I'll select my vertex. I've got snapping turned on. I think the default keystroke is Shift E, and you can cycle through the different snaps. This is just snap to grid. You can see up here in the flyout. It's just here. I'll change it to the next snap here. I'm snapping to all layers, and I'll click, and it looks about the right line thickness. And I know my line thickness based on on English. So I'll change this to Imperial. I know I want like 10 or 12 mils. The minimum for a board shop is usually 8. If you use a real fancy board shop, you might get lower than that, but we want to make ours cheap to make if possible. So we don't want the silk on our line to make us have to spend like an extra few $100s on our board. So I'm just clicking around and snapping to vertices here. Lost it. Okay, that's really about all we need. If we look in the 3D view, now you can see that you'll be able to see the silk outline once you place it, and you kind of want that. Another thing you can do when you're placing it, you don't want to always be in 3D. You might want to put some text that just indicates which side is the board outline. I like true type text. It looks a little bit nicer. So we'll just put something like board edge there. And this isn't something that we need at assembly time. We can make that about 40 mils high and bold so we don't lose it all. So there we go. So now when I go to place this in the PCB, I'm not going to put it on the board backwards or something like that. And once it's placed, you don't even see it. Okay, so we made our footprint. And if we go back to our schematic now, and let's make sure my database row is saved. Yep, this is Microsoft Access. I go back over here, and I got my little hotkey for place part. Okay, Mike. That's the database library that I just put the part info in. If I scroll down, see if we can find it. There we go. And say okay. There we go. There's my 2-pin part. And I wire it up however it makes sense. And now when I go and place this or import these changes into the PCB, it'll have that footprint sucked in. Now it looks like my grid's a little bit off. There we go. And if I right click and say supplier links, since I added all that information at the beginning, now I've got a nice little picture of what this is. I can pop open a data sheet right from there if I want to, and I get pricing information. So that's it. I hope you learned something. I hope this was helpful. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.